If you're sitting at home right now, like me, because of this damn coronavirus, you're probably running out of things to watch on Netflix. And this video is going to cover an awesome car called the Tucker 48. But if you're bored after this, and don't forget to watch this till the end first, go onto Netflix and watch Tucker, A Man and His Dream, which covers this entire car. And it's Jeff Bridges as well playing him, and it's from 1988. Can't go wrong there. Hello and welcome to the Car Nerd Talks. I am Jason, the Car Nerd Talks, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Preston Tucker, no that's the man, about the Tucker 48 made by Preston Tucker, which was released, would you believe, in 1948. However, only 51 of them will be built due to a massive lawsuit and some serious financial issues, which I'll get into. Preston Tucker began his life working in the car industry. He actually started in Ford Motor Company as an office boy and worked onto the assembly line, working with Cadillac as well as a salesperson, Studebaker as a salesperson, Dodge as a salesperson, and Chrysler as a sales manager. This guy lived and breathed cars, and he was also an incredible salesman. But then in the 1930s, he went to the Indianapolis 500 and started making engines for cars. And he joined Henry Miller and started making engines for Indianapolis 500 cars. These were tweaked to perfection and incredibly powerful engines for their time. And this led them to start the Miller and Tucker Corporation. And unfortunately, Miller did die later on, obviously, as everyone does, but Tucker, being the nice guy he was, gave enough money to the widow to allow them to carry on. But this drove him to be obsessed with making automobiles, and this was in the early 30s. But as the 30s progressed, obviously everything was going towards war, and around 1939, Tucker, being more of an engineer than he was a salesperson, started looking into ways he could profit from the war. And obviously the first thing he looked at was war equipment, and he started building in his shed back in Michigan, where he had moved, to build an armored personnel truck. And he wanted to make something light, fast, but could take a hit. And on top of it, he put what he called the Tucker turret, which was a lightweight, fast-action turret. Unfortunately, this never sold to the US military. However, it did give him his first go at military equipment. And actually, if you want to look more into this, you'll find that the Tucker turret was stolen from him by the US military with the designs gone. He also decided to design a new aircraft with an incredibly powerful engine, and again, the US military were really interested in this, but due to his financial problems, it never went through. However, during the 30s and 40s, he met a lot of interesting people in the automobile industry, which would help him out when he went to make his Tucker car in the 40s. And these people were people like Miller and also the Chevrolet brothers, the Swiss brothers who had started the Chevrolet company. And Louis Chevrolet would come and work on the Tucker 48 later on. After the war, Tucker saw an opportunity to get into the automobile market, much like a lot of other small companies had seen at the time. And the reason for that is the big three Detroit companies hadn't made a new car since 1941. So this left it open to a lot of people. So in 1946, Tucker went and started designing his car. And he wanted to showcase this car and gain some publicity. So he wanted to put it in Science Illustrated December edition. But he had his sketch almost perfect, but it needed some tweaking. So he called up a friend of his, Alex Tremulis, who had designed the Duesenberg. And he told him, you have 6 days to design my new car, and here's how much it would be. And Alex went away and thankfully came back, designed that car, and gave it over to the Science Illustrated people, who put it in their December 1946 edition, where it garnered massive popularity amongst the public. Now, originally when he got this design, he decided to go and get investment, and it was going to be called, as the public had started calling it because of the picture, the Tucker Torpedo, because it looked like a torpedo on wheels. However, he decided to change it to the Tucker 48 after the year it would go into production, because the war was very recent at this point, only being 7 years earlier, or 2 years earlier, should I say. And that meant he didn't want people having it on their minds when they thought about his car. Tucker, being a visionary, much like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk of our time and Howard Hughes of his time, he wanted to go big or go home, and he went and looked for a lot of funding and found some incredibly clever ways to get funding for his car, including selling accessories to get around an SEC regulation which wouldn't allow you to sell pre-orders, and also selling the dealerships up front for people to sell these even before it went into production. On top of that, he went and talked to the War Assets Association, who looked after having all of the war assets resold after World War II in the US, and he bought the Dodge Chicago engine plant, which was the biggest plant in the world at the time. So talk about going big, he had a bigger factory than Ford Motor Company at the time, which was ridiculous. Not only did he have a 1.97 square kilometer plant, he also had $17 million in the bank, and he had drawn the attention of the big three, who had pushed some politics around him and got onto the government, at which point the SEC started looking into what he was doing. Fortunately, this would end in a massive lawsuit in 1948 with only 51 of the cars built, and this would financially cripple the company, and the publicity also wasn't great. So this caused a close to the Tucker Corporation, and unfortunately these cars never went into mass production, but 51 were made. So let's talk about how they were, because these cars still today look incredible. A couple of interesting features about the Tucker 48. It was a rear-engine, rear-wheel drive car, much like the Beetle, because Tucker had looked at the efficiency of the German cars and decided that was the best place to put it. And also because of the weight of the front of this car, it would help it have a better performance. It also had what became known as the Cyclops eye. And the Cyclops eye was basically, a lot of other people in the 20s had put lights that turn with the wheels, and this has come back now into new BMWs, Mercedes, and trickling down, but this was very, very early technology. But because of some issues with the design of the car, they decided to put this into the center of the car. So it had a third eye in the middle of the car which would turn based on the wheel's movement, and it was attached to the steering column. And they also had to build a cover for this to allow people to use it, because in certain states no more than 2 lights were allowed. At first they integrated a roll bar into the actual frame of this car, allowing it to flip over and protect the people inside, which was tested on a racetrack where the car completely flipped over, the man walked away, and you'll see in the movie it's quite a cool moment. It also had one of the first shatterproof windshields, which was built to pop out forward in the event of an accident to allow the passengers to remain unharmed. The steering box was also positioned in front of the front axle to allow the driver to basically absorb the collision and not get hurt as much. It also had one thing that made him very famous. It had the crash chamber. So he had moved the glove box on the passenger side down into the wells of the car, and this allowed for a padded area underneath where the glove box would normally be for the person to move in a collision. You got to remember, this is a time before seatbelts, so that was very useful. Another interesting feature of this car was the final engine that went into it. Originally they had decided to build a 9.65 litre V8 that would go in the back, or flat six, sorry, that would go in the back of the car. But the problem was they kept having issues with the transmission and a lot of other problems on this, so they bought a company called Air-Cooled Motors and took their 5.5 litre V or flat six engine. Now, the original 9.65 would have been really cool because it would have been able to sit at 70 miles an hour at 1,000 RPM, but the new engine would be quite good as well. The new flat six produced 166 brake horsepower and was incredibly reliable. They ran this thing at maximum torque for 150 hours or 18,000 kilometers non-stop, and it never broke. More reliable than a modern VW. The last thing I'll tell you about this car is that it had an incredibly new transmission called the Tucker-matic transmission. And what they did with this was they built a transmission box which technically only had 3 gears. It was 1 speed for forward, 1 speed for back, and a park. And that was it. This was incredibly weird technology and allowed it to get away from all the gated, necessary gated transmission that you would need from everything else. The way they did this was they put a double torque converter so that instead of having to change up through a 4-speed transmission, they could simply just have the 1 gear. So that's the Tucker 48, an incredible car, and last year one of these sold for over $2 million at auction, which is incredible. So if you like the Tucker 48, spend your day today watching Tucker, the man and his dream on Netflix. It's incredible with Jeff Bridges. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow where I'll be talking about the 1986 Lamborghini LM002. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and if you're on Drive Tribe, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.